Ladies and gentlemen, we're back today. We've got somebody I'm excited to talk with. We've got Dr. Gilles-Éric Séralini, molecular biologist and specialist in endocrinology and toxicology. He's also the author of the Monsanto Papers, Corruption of Science and a Grievous Harm to Public Health. How are you doing today?
Hi. Very nice. And you?
I've been better considering the state of the world and some of what our corporations are doing.
The state of the world is very sad.
Yeah.
So at the climate level, at the toxicological level, because chronic diseases are going through every family, and we have linked that to the petroleum residues.
Yeah. We were just talking before we started about not just glyphosate, but also the Roundup, which it's even more than glyphosate. It's a combination of things, a GBH or whatever. It has all these extra ingredients in it. Can you explain a little bit about what's in this?
Well, since the Second World War, the industry has worked on what could kill not only the Jewish or the homosexuals, but also the plants. And they have put the chemicals of the Second World War in agriculture, that are the explosives and like nitrates, and the killing products like Zyklon B, who was used by Hitler to make the toxic gas in the concentration camps. So most of the pesticides are from the war, toxic products that have been refined to kill, in fact, life. And some Nazis were saying, well, if it kills Jewish, it can kill insects. So we can recycle the war products, the chemical toxic war products, in agriculture. So it's true that most of the pesticides are diluted, but they could be used for the war, either for explosives or toxic compounds. You know, the toxic gas were very important during the two world wars, and they are still. So then, after the Second World War, all the big countries were poor enough to say to the industry that became very rich because they were paid by the states to make the war, to make the products, the toxic products, the bombs, etc., for the war. So the countries, the states, the United States of America, the European countries, said, okay, we are poor enough and we are not going to control your toxic products. You do it. So the industry say, yes, I will do it, but I will keep the secret on how I do it, because another industry cannot copy me. And that was done. If you ask to NIH or EFSA or EPA, the experiments, not to make the products, we don't care, but that were made to control the toxicity of the product, they say, oh no, industrial secret, sorry, we cannot. Otherwise, we are sued by industry, which is true. The industry was suing companies or agencies after the war who gave the products. I knew it because I asked that to a German company for GMOs, Monsanto, or the German part of Monsanto. Mm-hmm. So I was nominated as an expert in the French Commission to control GMOs. And we had access to some of some of the experiments. And I saw that a lot of experiments were lacking. So I did it. But they fired me. They tried to be against me a lot. I was cited 56,000 times in the Monsanto Papers to organize my defamation and that I'm not a scientist anymore. They were saying everywhere that I made frauds in the newspapers and so on because they had access to communication agencies, to big international communication agencies. So I followed my research work, and little by little, I discovered that the pesticides that were inside the GMOs are very toxic and that they do contain a lot of carcinogens and a lot of toxic compounds, such as heavy metals like arsenic, which is really toxic on the long term, and they contain petroleum residues, which are called polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, which are very carcinogen. And this is common in most pesticides since the Second World War because this allows the dilution of little quantities of the chemical pesticide in formulation, the so-called formulation, which is the commercial product which is spread out by agricultural workers, by peasants. So yes, I discovered up to between 2005 and 2022 what the pesticides are made of and what the GMOs, which are modified, which are plants modified to contain a lot of pesticides, like Roundup Ready soya or Roundup Ready corn, and which is not really known because the communication agencies just confuse people to say, oh, it's about genetic modification, it's about something else, but they don't explain that GMOs are sponges for pesticides. They are modified to doing that. So that's toxic to eat that. And I tried to give that to rats. And the pesticide alone at levels that are authorized in the tap water. And I discovered the mechanism. I did omics. I did a lot of things on the animals to know it gives an oxidative stress in the liver and in the breast, in the mammal. In the kidney, and I discovered the mechanism by which it is toxic and by which it gives chronic disease. I'm not a specialist about neurons, but I discovered that making the literature search, it gives a lot of neurological disorders also. So yes, I understood that, but I still have 3 court affairs against me because in 2019, I was in a big TV show on prime time, and the journalists, 3 journalists in particular, have defamed me a lot on social networks, but also phoning to the TV, etc., saying that I shouldn't be anymore on TV or I shouldn't speak to the public anymore because of that. And even the Prime Minister of France, who we knew that is in the lobby system because a lot of ministry, well,
that's what they do.
Yeah. So they even phoned the President of the United States to say Séralini should be banned. He is a fraud. This is explained in my book. So yes, they were a lot against me, a lot. They tried to remove me from the university. They couldn't in France because, we have a system, the whistleblower system in France, and we also protect the researchers more than in the States, but I know scientists in the States that were fired out because they were because they discovered disturbing things on Monsanto products.
Yeah.
In fact, we don't care about Monsanto by other companies. But we are looking at, are these compounds that are everywhere in the environment toxic? And the answer is yes, and we understand why, because they contain hidden illegal products that are commercialized together with the pesticides that are in GMOs, thus, because GMOs are modified to contain a lot of pesticides.
So this study happened nearly 20 years ago, the original study. Has there been other studies that come out and confirm what you have found after the fact?
Yes, a lot. Yes, a lot. And I am just making a summary, at least 6 others. I also answered to all the criticisms. Not a lot of experiments were done similar to mine, because I measured 100,000 parameters in vivo on the long term in rats. So it's a cost to do that. It's $3 million, or to me, it was this cost. And to make it, I realized I organized a crowdfunding during 3 years, with very difficulty, which is the greatest crowdfunding ever done in Europe, still today. Mm. And I did that. I organized that so it's difficult for an independent researcher to collect so many funds. And I did that because I was writing books, and I was making formations for industry, for food industry, etc., to explain the toxicology and the security, the food security. So I put all this money in it, and I asked them that we should control the food products. And most of them were honest and were saying, okay, but they were not in pesticide industry. They were in food industry. And so I organized this one. So not many researchers are organized on animals on a long term, because with 200 animals, it's too costly to measure 100,000 parameters. There is no social insurance, so it's only research. So it costs a lot.
How long is long term?
Oh, this is very well defined. It's 2 years for mammals, which is lifelong experiment for the rat. And after 1 year, they begin to be sick and to die progressively. They get tumors, and they get liver and kidney problems.
And the EFSA has just found glyphosate to be safe for use in the EU. This is news as in the last 2 weeks or so. What's your thoughts on that?
It's a wrong problem. My thoughts are, they use all the data with the glyphosate tested alone, which doesn't exist. Tested alone by industry, because the industry is doing its own experiments, its own control experiments. So they use the glyphosate purified alone. But it's never used like that in the field. It's used as Roundup. And then they mix to other carcinogenic products. They say to dilute it. However, it amplifies by 1,000 the toxicity of glyphosate. So glyphosate would be toxic, but at very high levels, which are not used in the environment, which are not used in the field. And so the question is badly put. We shouldn't assess glyphosate. We don't care, because glyphosate is not used alone. We should assess Roundup or glyphosate-based herbicide. But the confusion comes from industry because they even call the glyphosate-based herbicides glyphosato, for instance, in South America, or they say that it's glyphosate. If you listen at the judge who was putting some questions to the chief of toxicology of Monsanto, Donna Farmer, I speak about that in my book, she always glyphosate and Roundup, which shouldn't be made for the public. We don't care about glyphosate or artificial names. We care about the pesticides that are really used in agriculture. And this is carcinogen, and this is toxic on the long term, of course. Not directly, it's not because you eat a product that contains that you die immediately, but you can develop within 10 years a cancer, or you can develop a hormonal disease, and we have understood very well why. So these kind of controls that should be compulsory, that are compulsory according to the European law, there is an explanation in the 1st of October 2019 that was won by one of the lawyer, Guillaume Tumorel, that was explaining that an industry should control on a long term the commercialized pesticide, not the theoretical pesticide that the industry declares. Because only Monsanto declares it's glyphosate, which is toxic, maybe, but we have control, it is not. We don't care. What we want to know if the commercial formulation called Roundup is toxic. And the answer is yes, clearly, but the industry doesn't control it, is not obliged to control it. Well, it should be, the law says they should, but nobody then takes them to court to say, you have not done your work. Well, except some judges in California, because of course people think it was not labeled correctly, Roundup, because it contains only 40% of glyphosate. And the rest is not just water. It's they are toxic products that we have evidence, but it is useless to look at one compound by one other. Roundup is 1,000 times more toxic than glyphosate. What should be done is to test Roundup as a whole, on cancer, on hormonal diseases, and then you find it. That's what I did.
Yeah, and the real tragedy about science, especially in the United States, is it's really rare to find public science or non-biased science. Everything nearly is done by industry for industry. Okay. So another question I have is the Monsanto Papers, which is chronicling the malfeasance and the problems that Monsanto has, but also them hiding some of the toxicology of what they do. What did you discover with the Monsanto Papers, and how did you get them?
Well, because I was one of the specialists on Roundup since a long time, since 2005, two lawyers from the Boumediene cabinet came to my lab and asked, how can we prove that Monsanto give lymphomas, give cancers, that the Roundup gives that? So they were looking at the scientific results that are published. I said, no, don't do that. Just ask what Monsanto did to prove the contrary. And this is why they asked the Monsanto Papers. And in 2016, we won on court to have the confidential data about Monsanto this was already the same for other products, for Teflon, for other industries in the States. And and then we had to study what all Monsanto did, because I did the same thing in Europe for GMOs for Monsanto. And I asked the toxicological control that Monsanto was performing. I knew that they were not good because I had asked that through the French government, because I was in the commission, in the official commission in the French government, to ask for toxicological control. So I said the important things is the toxicological controls that are compulsory and that the industry should have done, and they didn't. And this is why, and I did my own research in the same time, and progressively we discovered that me and my group, that there were carcinogens in the Roundup. And they discovered that Roundup was wrongly labeled as glyphosate, like if it was glyphosate alone, which the safety agencies are still debating about. And because the things have been organized since the Second World War, we should debate about the products that the industry declares. But if the products are the wrong products, then nobody cares, nobody see. So
yeah,
this is why I had access to the Monsanto Papers, because I suggested that to the American lawyers, and we won finally.
How much of it has shaken your confidence in science? Obviously, you didn't start your scientific career knowing all this. Have you lost faith in humanity along the way, and become disillusioned by science itself, or do you stay positive?
Sorry, come again. I didn't understand the question very much.
Does it ever get to you and about how science works these days, how political it can be? Has it ever depressed you or made you angry?
Well, I worked a lot on all this subject, and of course, I'm tired. I had some disease myself because of all these problems. But I think that persons who know should say, otherwise we are lost. I think that I discovered that most pesticides are made out of petroleum products. They are synthesized out of petroleum, and they do contain petroleum residues, including heavy metals, which are in petroleum because it's a fossil product, petroleum, that contains heavy metals, but that contains also carcinogenic compounds. So I discovered that goes into our food, and that makes our chronically sick. But if nobody says it, and it also destroys the climate and destroys the biodiversity. So I think that most of our problems on Earth, which are on climate and biodiversity, most of our general problems are linked to the this lack of toxicological controls, and I explain that in my books. So this is a way I can survive explaining that, and who wants to know knows it. However, sometimes it's sad, of course. The hope is in the transformation of the world, and the fact that sometimes we win. We won, for instance, in the States for 100,000 patients that Roundup gives cancer.
Yeah.
However, they always speak about, like you said, glyphosate in the safety agencies, about the compounds that the industry declares.
Yeah. And this fight is far from over because we have so much money that's going in, like we discussed before we started, organizations like the Genetic Literacy Project, which is funded only by the chemical industry, and they seem to have top ranking on Google whenever somebody wants to search for the safety and efficacy of pesticides. Can we?
They do on me.
Yeah, I've seen it. And I think we have so far to go. We've accepted climate change as being a serious thing. We've accepted so many things as being a problem, but we're still just scratching the surface of what chemical companies.
But I discovered that these industries, 8 of these industries, like Monsanto Bayer and Syngenta and others, 8 of them have more than 60% of the so-called BIP, the richness of the world, the money of the world. So also it creates social problems in the world. And so these are going over the strength and the power and the money of states, even the United States or the Russia. And we are still bothering about nations, but we have problems that are international because they organize the way they make the products, control the products, sell the products all over the world. And because it is very easy to understand, because it's made out of petroleum, it destroys the climate, because the big GIEC, the big international scientific association of scientists, says that 30% of the climate problems come from agriculture, because it is using a lot of petroleum. And so it comes from cars, of course, because of petroleum. So plastic is made out of petroleum residues because it's polymerization of petroleum residues. It's made with the waste of petroleum. So, of course, plastic is everywhere, on the beaches, in the sea, in Earth. So it's not a small problem. And all these industries that are linked to the use of petroleum, they are also making plastic, pesticide industry, etc. So all is linked, and we have constructed that by ourselves. At the beginning, they were not dishonest people. They were trying to make money in the system. And when we said we should control after the war, they said we will control ourselves. And so all the financial people that are the richest, and it invested in social networks. So now it's a complicated system of finance that we cannot easily disconnect.
Right. We're living through this time also when these industrialists also own the means of newspapers, social media, like you said. So I just wanted to reiterate what you said is these problems all stem from petroleum. We're talking about pesticides, GMOs, microplastics, nanoplastics, all this plastic pollution, and also, the CO2 in the atmosphere coming from agriculture, shipping,
it's from petroleum.
Everything that's going to kill us is petroleum. And it's one of the biggest,
because it's a fossil product. So because we put it too fast in the ecosystem, in the cycle of life, because it's a fossil product and it's made like our hormones with a chemical association between molecules that resemble to our hormones, because they are made from plants originally, and they are made from the messengers of life. So this is why when they are associated one to each other and they are heavy, they disrupt the life cycle. We understood that very well.
And as far as endocrine disrupting, microplastics seem to have the same issues, but yet it's harder to pin down on pesticides that, but both are endocrine disrupting. Am I wrong?
Yes, of course, because it is made out of the same molecules of petroleum, which are associated one to each other, so they are heavy, and they disrupt hormone receptors, hormone enzymes, they disrupt the hormonal system, and they disrupt also the neurological system, which is made with the same enzymes, with the same products, which are messengers. So this is why I demonstrated in 2018 that all the endocrine disruptors are also nervous disruptors. So we should not only talk about endocrine disruption, which is only one side of the coin, but of the second side of the coin, which is neurological disease, neurological disruption. So we should, I said and I published, we should talk about ENDs, which are endocrine and nervous disruptors, because they are the end of life also, unfortunately. And so most people, for instance, when they go to the medical doctor, they say, oh, my aunt, my father has a neurological disorder. I don't know why. The doctor doesn't know why either. But they cannot trace the origin. But we can, because we can reproduce all these diseases with rats and these products that are made with plastics or with petroleum residues, because they disrupt all the messages, either electrical or chemical. So they are disruptors of the cycle of messages, and our cells are just kept together because they are messages in between themselves. And if they are disrupted, it's wrong at any level, either cellular, metabolic, or electrical, neurological. So it doesn't work. We shouldn't put so much fossil product in the ecosystem so rapidly. And that's what we did.
That's what we
since
did.
the Second World War.
And we're still trying to figure it all out as we go. And there
and
has...
we didn't. And the fraud is that scientists should have said, oh, well, but it's toxic. We should imagine the recycling of these products. And they didn't, because the industry was lying. And this is a big fraud. We have not organized the fact that, for instance, we have discovered very recently, I published an editorial because there were big court affairs in the States because of PCBs. So it's made by Monsanto also. And we discovered that Monsanto lied during these court affairs. So they said, yes, the toxicological controls are made, and they invented the rat. One of the people from Monsanto, the chief of toxicology, on this affair, was saying that he was lying, that he invented the rat. So he is in prison right now. And all that is explained in scientific papers now. But that's all. It doesn't, we do not forbid as a society PCBs, which are among the most big, they are plastic residues. They are the most big pollutants in the world. And in every breast, every human breast, every penguin, we measure that in penguin, every form of life on Earth. You cannot imagine 1 kilogram of life any kind of life where it is not. Even in the microbiota, even in the intestine, even in the microbes, even in the bacteria, even in the yeasts. And we found that everywhere. However, it works still, the system, because life is, I am really impressed by the resilience of life. Life always finds ways to go, but sometimes you intoxicate it too much, and most of the people are sick. You cannot imagine one family in the world today which is not reached by chronic diseases. One member is reached by chronic diseases, either cancer or neurological disorders or hormonal disorders that necessitate medical drugs all the way during the life. And the medical doctors don't know why you had a cancer, a breast or prostate cancer, or any kind of cancer, or neurological disease. They just don't know why. They try to cure, try to improve the phenomenon, but they are not going through the reasons. And the reasons are these fossil products have not been tested properly. And this was organized by industry to make money on the head of most of human lives.
Yeah. And it takes forever. Cigarettes were the same thing. The industry did their own studies, and they said, oh, no, cigarettes are good. And doctors at some point in history were actually giving cigarettes to their patients, saying, if you want to be healthy, you smoke a pack of Kools a day, you know. And
the first person who said that, the head of the scientist who said cigarette is good, he authorized in commercial products more than 100 products together with tobacco. And you imagine that he was one of the first who defamed me in the States. And I speak about that in my book. And this guy, who was a scientist with a lot of medals, he, in fact, he authorized detergents in the cigarette to keep it in the pocket, because, you know, the tobacco, like in big cigars, made the tobacco leaves, they need to be kept in a special box because they will be dry in the pocket. And most of the cigarettes can be put in small packages in the pocket because they are with products that allow to store them. And these products are petroleum residues. We discovered that they are the same products that are in pesticides. You know, so everything is linked to petroleum, and it's a big industry. So between medical toxic products, for instance, vaccines are also made by the same industry. And you know, there is a logic. So because the petroleum acts as a product to store others, because it kills life. So it will kill any form of bacteria that goes in the tobacco leaves. So if you put it also acts as a detergent on the street. So the petroleum residues that are, in fact, in every column to distillate petroleum, they are petroleum residues, and they are recycled in pesticides, in detergents to wash the street, to wash everything, and in non-biodegradable detergents, and in tobacco, and in plastic, etc. So, I mean, for them, the benefit is in the end of the basket. So that means in the petroleum is distilled for our engines, for our cars, and then the rest of it is used as a chemical products to be detergent or to be pesticide or to be in pesticide or to be in plastics, etc. Plastic is full of these detersive, corrosive products.
The pharmaceutical and the chemical companies want to use everything that they invent, and even if they can't figure out a real efficacy for it, they will just make up something. They'll just say, well, let's just use it as a soap or something.
This is a commercial issue for them.
Yeah, they did this.
They began the major retailers of things in the world. They have more than 50% of the product of financial product of a state. So,
who's really in charge? That's the question. Who's in charge of your government? It's probably the industry, not the people.
Yeah, but it should be some scientists are paid for that. However, they have no access to the secret because they have argued after the Second World War, we are doing the scientific control, but we keep the secret. So most of the scientists do not have access to the toxicological controls of the industry. And this is a problem. We should remove that. That would change the face of the earth.
So what else can we do as far as everything that's linked to this problem, including the chemical aspect, but the political aspect, obviously transparency with these products? What else can we look forward to? What else can we do?
Well, we can do what you do, telling the truth to people, explaining why we are so much compromised, why science is just confusing because people say contradictory things, but most of the scientists do not have access to these toxicologic data, to the secret data. We had access to the Monsanto Papers, but that's quite rare today for an industry to have access to all the financial things, to all the secret data. People think they will not understand. In fact, it's easy to understand that so they do not request all this data. For instance, you find a new product. How was it controlled? Don't care about how it was made. Then you enter, is it made safe or not? But how was it controlled? And if it was not, it's a fraud. That's the case for most of our industrial products made out of petroleum and plastic because they are toxic on the long term. We have all the way to control the things on the long term, but it was not made by industry, which is not respecting the law. So we have good laws, but we do not have them respected. So how we could do to explain the things so that most of the people request transparency. Today, not enough people request transparency, so we don't have transparency.
Yeah. More education, at least enough to where people would become curious about what's going on. We have...
You're right. The problem is the education. People are not with an educational system sufficiently good intentionally.
But yeah, exactly. But when a study comes out and says that 80% of the adults and children in the UK have traces of glyphosate in their urine, that should already, for an uneducated person, be shocking. But then they come along and say, no, it's fine though. But democratically, I never asked for that.
Yes, they say, well, it's fine because it's not toxic. That's what they say. In fact, if you push them at the end, they answer on the toxicity, and there is a renewal of glyphosate because it's tested alone, because it's a lie. It shouldn't be tested alone because it's not used alone. It's Roundup. So this is a problem. We are in a big circle, and it's a big fraud, and we will either
I'm
make
not.
that fraud public or die out of the biodiversity and climate problem that we will create.
Yeah, I'm not going to stop making a big deal about it if you won't. I mean, we have to keep, keep poking the giant, poking Goliath.
Well, it was not my intention at the start to start.
Sure.
I'm trying to understand what happened. And slowly by slowly, I understand that there was a fraud and that the toxicological controls were not made, and that was wrong. And that was the origin of cancer, the origin of neurological and hormonal diseases. So I discovered things little by little, and I discovered then slowly that it was a financial problem. And why? Because these industries were passing the governments, the national governments. So we are organized as people wrongly for the modern world. We are not able to see over our borders. For most of Europeans or Americans, they don't look after the borders, and the companies are free outside the borders.
They need no passport. They can just do whatever they like. And another.
The nice thing is that they need passports. However, they still do whatever they like.
Yeah. It's a real tragedy of our time. And on this show, we do a lot of corporate malfeasance and the ways that these companies, capitalism itself, has continued to do this in not just this industry, but every industry. And I should mention to everybody that the main reason why they talk about how great their products are is because they want to, feed the world. They want to feed the world. And it said that they have 20% crop increases, on all the studies they did. Well, 70% of the studies they've done are from industry. So you can't believe a word they're saying. And the other thing with food distribution is the Western world eats 1.5 times more than the rest of the world. So it's not even about food scarcity, it's about food distribution.
Of course. Not only about food distribution, but food making. We can have another system to make food. Not the big fields, not industrial agriculture, and this lives out of industrial agriculture. 30% of our income tax, either you are in the States or in Europe, goes to the industrial agriculture. Either helping companies, the so-called common agriculture policy, etc. So 30% of our income tax goes to the industrialization of agriculture. And this goes to companies to buy pesticides. So pesticides are financially supported by people. The industrial agriculture would not wouldn't work for a day if you don't have financial help. And the financial help comes from our income tax. So this is a dead-end system. Because we are supporting the pesticide, and this industry says we need pesticide to feed the world, which is not true. We need pesticide to feed the pigs, which is the most common way, or the chickens, which is the most common way to eat, or cows, to eat, the most common way to eat. But we don't need pesticides to have polycultures. We could feed, and this was demonstrated by Olivier de Schutter, there are books on that, we could feed 12 billion people. So more than the actual um, population of the world, we could feed 12 billion people with resilient agriculture, with diverse agriculture, but we couldn't feed all this industrial meat because we are feeding more pigs than babies, than kids around the world.
Right.
Kids are starving. You know, the starvation continues with this system because it goes to the rich people to eat pigs and to eat pigs and cows and chickens, not to the poor people.
Yeah.
So the problem is that it increases the difference of money between the rich and the poor. $2 a day for poor people and 80,000 for rich, or more for the richest in the world, which is a very small minority. So a very small minority of people is actually heading the world, heading the system. And we should change that. We will one day, but I hope we will not die before.
Well, even if we do, it'll be our own fault, and that, you know. But
well, when we say "our,"
well, the Western world.
Yeah. However, when you look, it's a very small minority of people who decide.
Right.
And when we see it's our fault in the world, etc., we should be careful that the we doesn't exist. It's a minority that decides, and a very small minority of people. And so it's not us. And this minority makes us believe that it's all the population that decides.
Right. The United States makes up 2% of the world population, yet they consume about 20 to 25% of the world's resources. Glyphosate also was patented originally as a...
Because of this industrial agriculture.
Right. Glyphosate was originally patented as an antibiotic, which we know now that microbes... Yeah, right. Microbes in the soil are one of the main reasons that we get food, is because of the mycelial networks. And so now we're just finding that out in the last 10 years. Soil science has changed rapidly. And we know now that we're depleting our soil. And you mentioned eating meat. I don't eat meat anymore. I'm a vegan. I don't eat the animal products. Beans by themselves could fix the nitrogen in the soil and save the world.
Of course, many other products. Of course.
Yeah.
I'm working on biodiversity problems, on microbiota, which are, I'm writing a book on the fact now that we are a living ecosystem. A human is a living ecosystem. Because of we have so many microbes in our intestine, more than human cells. If we would have, how should I say, an extraterrestrial plane, they would say, what are these microbes? Not because we are small, but because we have so many microbes in us, more than human cells. So we are first microbes.
Yeah.
And
my scientist friend said, well, who do you think's really in charge of your body? It's probably the microbes. They're controlling you, Yeah.
And I discovered that I made a genetic analysis of that, and I discovered that most people believe that they are bacteria, but they are yeasts, mushrooms, if you want, very small mushrooms, yeasts, that are in fact organizing some bacteria, even to detoxify. Because I have a part of my lab which is working on detoxification. So to detoxify, the yeast, the mushrooms, are able to eat petroleum residues or plastic residues if you stimulate them. However, they are dying because of industrialization of agriculture, because we kill the soil We kill the ecosystem. So we are losing 30% of the living species, not only the big ones, like we say, but also the microbes. And as we are pieces of soil, standing pieces of soil, that means that we have in us microbes, which are not only bacteria, but also yeast. And so if they die, if they are killed by pesticides, for instance, which is the case, the things are not well fermented and they are not well detoxified. So a big hope also comes from microbes, but we should keep them. And we are killing them by of course, the big kill of the biodiversity in the world. We are losing biodiversity, as you know, 30% at least.
Yeah. We've lost 70% of our wildlife has disappeared since the year 1900.
Yes, when I say 30%, I am generous. It's more in a lot of cases. However, we have to include in the wildlife microbes.
Yeah.
Because they are defending our health, because they are defending our life. And we didn't see that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we said we care, since Rachel Carson, we care about birds, we care about eagles and so on, but we are losing microbes which are essential for our life.
Mm. From microbiology in our stomachs to the microbiology in the fields to the antibiotic resistant bacteria that's killing us.
They are the same. A paper I wrote a review in 2023, so this year, showing that 200,000 years ago, we have been selecting in our digestive system the microbes who were useful for us, and we are standing pieces of soil. We have selected the ecosystem useful for us in our intestine, more than in our stomach, in our intestine. And we have a lot of intestine, and even the insects and the birds have that in their intestine. However, we are losing a lot of this biodiversity, and it is because they eat before us and give to us the essential products so that we can live also. It's a symbiosis, it's a partnership. And it's important to know that this is lost with the biodiversity, and to realize for people that we are killing the ecosystem, we are killing ourselves.
Yeah. This information about the microbiome is relatively new, but it's still very true and very exciting. And at the same time, we still haven't figured out how to cultivate a lot of the microbes outside of the gut, because as soon as we take them out of the gut, we can't cultivate them in a lab. And that makes it so when we do glyphosate and we do all these kind of things, we are messing with stuff we don't understand while being arrogant and saying, "Whoa, no, it's fine. It's fine."
We discovered that in the commercial yeast, the so-called probiotics that are commercialized, there are only 2 or 3 different, and we have hundreds in the intestines. We saw that by genetic analysis. So we have a too poor understanding of what's really is the biodiversity of microbes in our intestine. And they come from often organic vegetables and fruits, because they eat before us and they go to fruits and to vegetables. But the industrial system wash them too much, and make them sterile, make them in vacuum, and so they cannot live anymore. But most of the time, if you take vegetables or fruits in a garden, if you just wash them with water, you still have some of the yeast and the microbes on the product. Even if it's clean, you still have a lot, and they will reactivate your intestinal digestion, but not only. We have discovered that even yeast make messengers for our brain, for our nervous system, which is around the intestine, the second brain, but which communicates also with the real brain.
Yeah, this is the gut microbiota superhighway that goes from your gut all the way up to your brain, and it regulates your mood, and it regulates everything about who you are. So,
yeah, it regulates also the formation of new vessels. It regulates a lot of metabolic system. I wrote that in the review on my website, which was published in March, last March.
So one more question, then we'll let you get back to your life. What's the future for you? What books are you working on, and what projects are you working on that we can look forward to?
On September the 1st, I have 3 court affairs against the law in Paris, because 3 identified journalists have defamed me, and they created problems in my university. So I would like to continue my research and to still be a researcher. And even the prime minister phoned to the president of my university. They want to find me out, etc. However, I still am fighting because of that, because I want to keep my activity. And I will demonstrate that the fraud comes from them, from the 3 journalists that are themselves small things from the lobbies, from Monsanto, because they have exactly the same arguments. They repeat that either intentionally or not, I don't care. They repeat that to destroy me. And we have all the arguments to prove that in court, and we will go in court. I have lawyers. I am communicating. Just before you interviewed me, I was still finishing the abstract for my lawyers in order to explain what I knew. And I am trying to collect enough money to go to court, because my lawyers are asking some money, and maybe they are not sure that we will win, so maybe we will need money. So they are asking me still 5,000 euros, and I don't have them yet. So this is my first priority of this summer, to get the court organized on September the 1st. Fortunately, I have organized a consortium of NGOs. 80 NGOs are now aware about my research, and they are explaining that the states don't follow the law enough for pesticides and GMOs, and for pesticides, of course. So I'm trying to explain that, and the lobby, who are against me, don't want me to talk to the media to explain that the law that was not applied for big companies, but also by states, by governments, because in fact they are linked, or quite often, or they know people that link them together. Right. Not all the people link them, but there are enough.
There's enough.
And so I am trying to do that. On the same time, I am following my research on yeast to detoxify the people. I think there is a way. We are full of pollutants, but they are mostly from petroleum. So yeasts in our microbiota, in our intestine, are able to detoxify us. However, they are often killed by the petroleum residues. So some are killed, some are not. We try, but some are pathogenic, some are helpful for health. So I'm trying to study the good ones and why and how is that possible, and to understand as much as I can. And I am on this project. And do you know what? I found that one of the most fermented known product on earth is wine. However, natural wine is very rare. So the wine naturally fermented. It's fermented with artificial yeasts that are controlled and that are a lot lower than natural yeasts that are able to detoxify. So I am working on that to understand, and they are probably in natural wine that I am right now analysis. I have published a book on the taste of pesticides and the making of wine, and because like hydromel, like beer, it's a fermented product. Most of what we eat is fermented by yeast, and some of these products transform because microbes eat before us, and they cut the food in small parts that we are able to absorb. Otherwise, we couldn't eat correctly. And this happens because of yeasts. And I'm studying that today.
I'm interested in the yeast because I think that if it's anything like everything else we've cultivated, if we have brewer's yeast or wine yeast or bread yeast that's been cultivated over and over and over, and it's only one variety or whatever, that it gets weaker and weaker and weaker over time, just like our food.
And overall, they are too less. There are not enough varieties. The problem is that there are hundreds of varieties at a natural level, and we are cultivating only one or two varieties. And this is a problem that they don't, because each variety makes a job, and we don't have enough varieties in the commercial system to make the job. We don't know all of them. So the natural varieties are in natural products, on natural products too.
Yeah. Look, we'll wrap it up. Let's stick around. We're going to talk right after this, but I wanted to say, Dr. Gilles-Éric Séralini, wonderful human being, molecular biologist, especially in endocrinology, toxicology, and also fighting these monstrosities they call, polluters, the agriculture, the chemical, the petroleum industry. Also,
my first interest in research in life was to understand the pollution, to understand how pollution functions and destroy our lives, makes our disease, and that's why I began on baby genes with a new technology to discover the pollutants that were stick on baby genes. More than 400 products I discovered. And in these 400 products, I concentrated, I said there is too much, I concentrate on the 10 first. And 3 were belonging to Monsanto that I didn't know.
Of course. Who else?
The PCBs, Roundups, and dioxin used in Vietnam War in Agent Orange Monsanto was making. So they were patenting these 3 pollutants. I didn't know before, but I discovered that they were the main ones in baby genes.
What year was that?
1990.
Okay.
Around 1990, between 1990 and 1994.
Yeah. Just the beginning of us figuring out. I had a lady on here. She was a PhD.
When I was nominated as a professor, when I had the chance to win the contest of professorship.
Oh, wow.
Which is quite rare in in the world to become a professor when you are 30 years old.
Yeah. I mean, now you've had an illustrious career, and now hopefully you'll be, a hero in the future. But right now it's tough times. I know.
I don't know if there will be a hero in the future, but I don't know if we will have a future.
We'll wait and see. I'm as optimistic as you are. I'm like, I don't really know what's going to happen. But
I am optimistic too. This is why I can survive,
yeah.
But that doesn't make everything.
Everybody check out the Monsanto Papers, Corruption of Science and a Grievous Harm to Public Health. We're going to sign off to everybody at home. Thank you for coming, everybody. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.